if you got a hat on or glasses or hearing aids like I have, you can take it all off and on. But the mask, and you just drop it down, but you can make it as tight as you want. You don't have your ears aren't always. It's good.
So you customized your mask with the goggle strap.
Yeah, I'm always on the cutting edge. You know that. I wouldn't want to be declared to be old school or anything. Always on the cutting edge.
No one would ever accuse you of being old school.
I think your mustache qualifies as a mask.
Yeah, well, it did for a while. I didn't clip it for long. I go, as a matter of fact, I'm due for a little trim right now. Matter of fact, a year ago, my wife said my hair was as long as it was when we got married, and she insisted I cut it. So
that's awesome.
Be a little shaggy dog.
Oh, really? It still doesn't grow on top, though. Yeah. Brian, you're getting a little grayer, buddy. I haven't seen you in a while.
I'm a silver fox, man.
Yeah, just shows how smart you are.
Bill Wadley says you need to start dyeing your hair. I'm like, well, I don't know about that, Bill, but maybe he's right.
It looks like you've seen a ghost, Brian. It's just, bone white.
But if you dye your hair, your girlfriend won't know who you are, Brian, and then she'll be stuck.
That's right.
Okay, I guess we can start now. This is great. All right, Coach, thanks for coming on. Sure. I'm going to be in the background pushing buttons and things like that. So what it's going to look like is we're going to start there.
Okay.
And then it's going to move into, and then it'll move into that without me. And then it'll switch to, and then it's going to switch to you, because you're the most important person. So
I don't know about that. Are we taking questions, or is this just you?
It'll be just you and I.
Okay.
Yep.
He's got the questions. So he
sent me some of them. I didn't like them. Those are hard questions. That wasn't easy stuff.
Yeah. So let's start with the soft stuff, or I'll introduce you. But
right. Let me escape, and then Brian, you just kick it off. We're ready to go.
All right. Well, I want to introduce Gregg Troy, and I really had the opportunity to have a life-changing experience working for Gregg. The first year he had a combined program at the University of Florida. But Gregg's been a part of my career and someone I could call and ask questions of almost anytime I wanted. And I appreciate his mentorship. But to make Gregg's career come into a little bit of perspective, he was the head coach at Bulls High School. He won an unprecedented string of high school championships in Florida. From there, he went on to the University of Florida, where he won an NCAA championship. He's also been a head Olympic coach and on several Olympic staffs. He is known as a hard training coach with great perspective, and I'm looking for you to share a little bit of that experience with us, Gregg. And we're not going to talk a lot about training. I think people that get this successful in their careers have some things to share on the soft skills side of things, and want to hear what you have to say. But first, I'd love to hear about your first job.
Thanks for all the kind words, Brian. Yes, so I don't. And if we talked about training, I'd just give you 10 1,000s, and we'd be all done. So easy. Yeah. That's tongue in cheek. First job is everyone misses my first job. My first job was in Fort Myers, Florida. I did a little club stuff when I was in college, but my first job was in Fort Myers, Florida. I spent 2 years in Fort Myers. I went down there I was from Sarasota. I went down there with the intention of just spending one semester, getting enough money to school. And the high school swim coach came to me and said, listen, I was at a junior high. And he said, if you'll come coach the team, I'll do all the paperwork for you. So I didn't have to do any of the administrative stuff. So I kind of reverted on that again now. But it didn't have to do any of the administrative stuff. And I took a job. We were lucky to be successful and have a few pretty good athletes. And they brought me to high school the next year. And I spent 5 years in Fort Myers. And it coincided with Jenny Dunkel. She would have coached the club team there. And Jenny left, and we'd been pretty good friends. And Jenny asked me if I wanted the club team too. Your classic high school teacher, high school swim coach, and running a club team in a small facility. So it was a great experience, though. It taught me a lot of things that still use. That first job was really interesting. Um, my morning practice was on double session. My morning practice was at 5 to 7 because I had to be in the classroom at 7:30. And I was in classes at 1:30, supposed to stay till 3, but the principal allowed me to leave. So I would leave I'd leave somewhere around 2 o'clock and grab a sandwich and a short nap. And then I had a 5 to 7 o'clock practice for the club team, and actually started a little earlier than that. And then I had an hour's break and had an 8 to 10 practice for the high school team at night. And I'd find an hour to go sit with a guy named Wes Knott, who was the head coach at high school, been at a rival high school, who'd been there for years, and just sat and kind of learned some things from him and watched. And in between, one of those classic scenarios, we built a program. I would go in at 4:30 early in the morning so that some guys from another high school could train. Paul Asmuth, who was a big-time distance freestyler, and then noon, and my lunch period at school, I would go in at the lunch period and take the only girl breaststroker I had, who worked a job and could barely make ends meet, and I'd take her to the pool that was on campus. All the rest of we used work, but the pool on campus wasn't heated. I'd go in at noon and she'd swim for 45 minutes because it's the only breaststroker we had today. So it gave me a great experience seeing the whole deal.
That's pretty amazing. It's you never underestimate how hard swimming coaches work. And when you look back, who in your career, who are your mentors? Who helped you become who you became?
I think my first one to go back to and put I had some people that were, I swam at Sarasota YMCA, and some people in the Y organization were really good that taught me some ins and outs of bureaucratic scenarios. I always tell people my father was, because he was a work guy, one of those Depression era graduates that couldn't go to college, World War II vet, hiked across the country, and so I came from a pretty disciplined family. So I got some great structure in my years. That my high school coach first year was John Range. And John had swum at Alabama and FSU, worked for George Haynes for a while. I think he taught me some of the early nuances, some of the early things, technique, talking to people. First guy that one of the first ones to shave in Florida, so he taught us how to shave for meets and stuff like that. College coach Ruth Bruton was a tremendous worker. And back to that first Fort Myers job, TCU's program wasn't especially good. He was their first swim coach, and he'd run a morning practice, teach classes all day, run the afternoon college practice in Fort Worth, and then his club team was in Dallas, and he'd drive over to Dallas, and I'd ride over him with the Dallas because we didn't have a whole lot of people to swim with at TCU, to swim 8 to 10 at night in his club program in Dallas. So I learned a lot of work ethic from him and dedication and staying on top of what he did. And then the other ones, I'm a big Bill Sweetenham follower. Sweetenham has a tremendous grasp on the sport, understands it at all levels, especially the international level, and what it takes. So I think those people, but more than anything else, I learned from athletes. I've fortunate or unfortunate, whatever it was, I was a head coach right from the start. So I didn't have many people to actually sit with. So I learned a lot sitting around at clinics. I learned a lot listening to other people. I learned from working with some good athletes and taking what they did. And I probably hurt some of them sometimes. David McCagg was in my very first group. So I'm working with a world-class athlete right off the top. And I learned a lot of things. It's not easy, but those were all good mentors.
So talking about something you learned or thought you knew, how about you tell us something that maybe you were feeling pretty strong about, but realized you were wrong?
There's a whole lot of things, because there's lots of little things. The biggest one, I used to equate just hard work to success, and that's not it. Working hard alone doesn't get the job done. You got to finesse that hard work. And it doesn't matter how much you swim in your 2-hour, your 1-hour time period or things. You can't just work hard. It helps if you do work hard, but it's not the only equivalent. And that to me would be the single biggest thing that I found out over time where I was wrong. We just work hard for the sake of working hard. I think that's sometimes why we were so much better in the second shave, especially when I was at Balls. And I wish now, as I look back on it, some of my better athletes were probably right. They could have gotten rest isn't the correct word, but we could have prepared a little bit differently. And we worked hard. We would have just been a little bit smarter about cycling a little bit.
You talk about some of these great teams and your successes with some individual athletes. There's been a lot and some pretty storied names in our sport. But what's one of the proudest successes that most people wouldn't know about or think about?
I think about that sometimes. I've been asked that question a few times, and I think the most important thing is don't miss Tammy. Watching a guy win a gold medal or break a world record and team championships are all big things. I think the most successful thing is when that kid calls you 20 years later, tells you how successful he is in life, how his family's doing. The real special one calls and says, "Hey, Coach, can you point me the right direction where I can find a program where my child can get the same from the sport?" And sometimes they're good swimmers and they're not such good swimmers. And it's really gratifying. Sometimes it's a little humbling too, because sometimes you have a kid walk up to you and talk, "You remember me?" And you kind of remember him, but you've seen so many. And then I always worked with large groups. So that sort of dynamic, you start to forget a few of them. You hate to do that. You can remember the name, but you can't face with it. But I think that's the most gratifying thing. We miss so much our sport, what we actually do for society, and the things we do for society and the people we miss. That might be the most important thing. So,
I love that. And on that note, you talked about large groups and just you've had incredible team success at every level. So what do you ascribe that to? What went into your team culture? Do you have anything that you always went back to or really relied on?
Well, and I want to downplay it. Hard work, dedication. I think when we look at it, culture is it's a very unique thing, and I think we overuse it. We may not even understand the things that are involved in it, and it has to do with some leadership. It has to do with, and that stems from the coach, but also stems from the athletes. It has to do with trust. The one thing we always went back to is honesty and trust. Those are the two biggest things. If the athlete is honest with the coach, then the coach can trust the information you're getting from the athlete, and then you can put that back to them in a good form. And I think that trust then makes the work more important. It also helps the coach decide when you don't need to do quite as much work or how you can modify the work. The year we won the women's NC2A meet, and I look back on, I think one of the biggest things we had going is everyone knew the role. And I think sometimes in culture, we don't allow, we think so much it's this rigid thing. I think the culture is a little more flexible. It has some flexible how you work those flexibility, but the key thing in it is everyone has to know what their role is. And that team that won, every girl on that team knew their role. Now their role might not be anything better than just challenging the person next to you. First year when we built the program, I think you were actually there the year we had a girl, Katie McAllen, who swam with us, and she was a walk-on. Probably didn't belong at a Power 5 conference in a program that was looking to be in the top 10. When I took them over, they weren't. And then we got the top 10 very quickly. But the team was small, and she played high school basketball and swam a little bit. Her role when we talked was you'd be the first person at practice every day. She'd run some track and pass. I said, be the best runner. Find something you can be really good at. And she was really significant in setting up the culture that lasted through that team that won, because she was the first person at practice. We got into a situation. She and Martin Wilby would come into practice and see who could be there first. They were getting to morning practice at 3:30 to see who could be there first. It was time to call the horses off. But she knew. And the year we won, Gemma Spotforth was our team captain. Gemma was fantastic. She was in psychology. She's a counselor. And she helped define the girls on the team that might have been she gave them a role. They talked about what their role was. And someone's role might be recognizing all the birthdays. And someone else's role might be making sure everyone is at practice. And someone else's role might be making sure that party person was a little less of a party person, or got out of the lounge a little bit earlier. So I think that might be the key thing in culture that we miss, because if it's all just about winning, everyone can't win. It's all about going fast. Everyone can't go as fast, but they can be the best they can be. But the best you can be doesn't always fit in a collegiate environment, and may fit in some and others. So I think in any environment where you've got a good culture, one of the things in culture is every athlete has to have a role.
Love it. You mentioned Martin Wilby, and you've had some great assistant coaches, Martin being one of them. What's something you've learned from an assistant coach?
I've learned so much from assistant coaches. It's amazing. And I tried to think just one thing, and I couldn't come up with just one, unless it's patience. My first assistant coach, strangely enough, I look at the pool as a classroom. And I was planning on going to law school, so I had a history, but I also had an education minor, and I had to do student teaching. And my first assistant coach was actually my first boss. It was a lady named Henrietta Lehman in Texas, and it was an 8th grade classroom, and I spent a semester with her, and she kind of gave the reins, and she kind of really gave me the reins of the classroom. And then she would just critique me every week or so and talk. And when we finished the whole thing, she said, probably the single biggest thing you need to work on is patience. You just don't understand. It takes a little bit longer for some people to get than others. And oddly enough, guys like Martin Wilby and Larry Schoaf, I found they were more patient than me, so they kind of tempered what I was doing. And that patience really, really key. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned from assistant coaches. But the others, all kinds of little things. Jamie Lewis worked our club team here, and just stuff like, we had kids, they were getting really good off the wall. So I was watching our club kids, they were so good at wall. And I went to her one day and I just asked her, because I wasn't watching her practice. She was making everyone take 4 kicks underwater off every wall with a kickboard. And it's a really tremendous drill. And that's stuff like that. And she was using socks. I didn't use socks. I fought that for a while. But they were doing some really great kick stuff. And I asked why again. And then she started telling me about socks. So little things from people like that. And this, I wouldn't want this to sound wrong. Sometimes assistant coaches helped me because they made me clarify what I was doing. I don't have that biomechanics stuff and everything. So a lot of what I did feel, and what I learned listening to people and interpreting things myself. And sometimes assistant coaches helped me just when I explained it and asking me questions, because their questions made me refine the way I did things, made me look at it a little differently. And sometimes probably modified the way I did it, and sometimes just clarified why we were doing is what we were doing, and made it a little more rule of thumb.
Fair enough. And it's always interesting to see how you've grown with your assistant coaches, and I fully believe that, because your programs have grown. And when you look at your club situations, Bulls, Florida, they got better, and they got better on a world-class level. What did you do to kind of manage upward for the people that were in charge at Bulls, at Florida? You have any advice for coaches to manage upward and to help you do what you want to do?
Wasn't afraid to give them responsibility, and allow them a lot of leeway to do things. I would, if I was going back, I would do it even more. By the same token, I held them accountable for that responsibility. And I think sometimes we don't hold them accountable often enough for them to learn. And at the same token, like I said, I was assistant coach. So I think it was really important that I allowed them to grow from those situations. They work with all different levels. I think sometimes, maybe it's right or wrong, I don't know, but my feel is sometimes coaches get pigeonholed. You're a distance coach, or you're a sprint coach. I think I coached medley, and he works really good with breaststrokes. You might work better with a certain group, but I think you're a well-rounded coach is really important. There's so much more interrelationship between the strokes than what we actually breaststrokers swim a lot of freestyle. Why don't they just swim just breaststroke? Backstroke is some other strokes. Why don't they swim just backstroke? and we have freestylers doing the other strokes. That's never a problem. But sometimes we worry about those things. I think that allowing your assistant coaches to be more than just one capacity makes them better coaches, makes them well-rounded coaches. And if you get labeled in that one box, it's real hard to move on, whether it's an athletic director or a club. Clubs want people who can work with everything. And athletic directors, when they're hiring the head coach, they don't want someone that's just a sprint coach or they want someone who can work with everything. So I think that's one of the key denominators. And try to move people around, give them some opportunities to work in other areas. Unfortunately, in the collegiate environment, I think that's a little harder to do. But actually, it's a good thing to do. And the other thing, if going back with assistant coach, I think empowering them in a situation where you're gone a little bit and you trust their judgment when you're gone, I think that's really important.
I love those lessons on holding your assistant coaches accountable. I think it lets them grow with autonomy and certainly allows the program to blossom a little bit. Going back to my question, maybe I didn't phrase that well enough, but we got a great answer about assistant coaches again. I was more curious about the people that were above you, the people that ran the bowl school, your athletic directors. Any advice on managing upward to make sure that your goals can be achieved, or they know how to help you?
Hey, square one, I think a lot of people make the mistake. You better understand what their goals are before you take the job. Because if you don't understand their goals, then you're going to be in conflict with them. So I was always very clear when I took other jobs, when I interviewed for any other jobs, that I wanted to make sure that at least the dynamic of the people I'm working with either completely understood where I wanted to go and were with it, or I could modify what I wanted to do to fit what they wanted. Because if they're not happy with you, it's a really tough situation. And then once I had the job, being proactive is really important. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And if you're good at it, you know where the problems are. You know which athlete's going to be a problem. You kind of know where your pitfalls are going to be. Not all of them. There's always going to be things that blindside you, but you want to try to be proactive enough. You're looking out in front, you see where those pitfalls are. And when I saw those pitfalls, I wouldn't wait till we got there. I mean, I'd let the people I was working for know these are coming in advance, and then this is my plan how I'm going to deal with it. So I think being proactive, getting with the guy above you, knowing what their expectation was, and being real clear with one another eliminates a whole lot of things. When you've got that situation, I think they trust you better. Then you can also trust in that situation too.
Love it. Along that line, what's something you wish you'd known at the start of your career that you would share with other coaches as they start theirs?
I wish I would have known how hard it really is. I think when I started doing, I was 21 years old out of college. That schedule I gave you, I'm teaching full class loads during the middle of the day, and I'm planning and enjoying myself in the off time, and it was fun. It was kind of like in a fraternity. But the profession is one of the few that the more you do it, the more it encompasses your time. You don't really get more time off. You don't really get longer vacations. And back to that culture things, cultures are easier to create than maintain. And that makes your job, especially as a head coach, really, really hard because it takes a lot of time. It infringes on other things in your life. And you've got to know those things. And I wish I would have known some of those things a little bit earlier because there's some things I would have done different that would have impacted my lifestyle a little bit better. And, maybe even some family situations would have been. I've been fortunate, married to the same woman, have a great, great family and son. I look back, there's certain times I wish I would have done more things with my son. I think if I had known some of that stuff earlier, it would have really helped. And the shortcuts. The sport is brutal. If you think you've got the answers, boy, are you going to get slapped around at some point because there are no answers, because if there was, we'd all have the book. It would make it easy and would be no conflicts with athletes, but that is not the case.
That is a pretty golden nugget. I wish I knew how hard it was. And I'm sure that should open some eyes. It doesn't open my eyes, but that's a good thing to think about. And you touched on this a little bit. How you talked about some balance. What have been your strategies for staying healthy and having a little bit of balance in your career?
I've been fortunate that family has kind of kept me grounded. I think friends, and this go backwards. I think having good friends within the coaching community is really important, and good friends are the guys you can count on whether you're swimming good or bad. Everyone likes to come tell you how good it is. When you have one of those bad meets, and if you've never had one, you're a fortunate person. When you have one of those really bad meets, I always used to say, when we were at Bulls, we had a staff of 11, and when we had a bad meet, people out there was high-fiving one another, and when we have a bad meet, it's like you're standing at the deck of the pool alone. You're looking around, where are all those other guys? But I think having good friends that will share those things are really important. And back to what I wish I would have known, because it's so time consuming, it is such a hard profession. I wish I would have known that, because I would have gone way out of my way to secure more relationships outside the sport, because as you get a little bit out of it, you find that you missed a whole lot of things in your life that maybe we get caught in that swimming bucket. It's way, way more important than what it is. And don't misunderstand me, it's tremendously important. But when you get outside of it, you realize how small it really is. And there's not a whole lot of people that really care as much as we do. So we're back at where we started the place. What's one of the best things? The people we produce, because that has a long-term, long-lasting effect.
Agreed. And I think coaches being isolated is a real thing, right? I think we become maybe a little bit more aware of that. And certainly this last year during COVID didn't help that at all. But during this last year and all the challenges we faced, was there a lesson that you learned during COVID that you'll take with you?
I think the life lesson is, let's emphasize that a little to me now, that it's good to have friends outside. I think COVID further emphasized to me, and this is a more personal note, how important your family is, connections with those. And I think we all learned that, regardless of what profession. From a swimming standpoint, I think some of the COVID lessons, one that I'm pretty certain of, is my last 5 to 10 years, I started to get to the point that I thought we were swimming too much and the sport had become stale. And even so much so that my first year out, we had a really year in 2019. 18 was a little hybrid year, but 19 was the first year completely out. And our season was really good. And I was very concerned in 19 because our normal meet schedule, we'd swim more. Well, I had these older guys. We were swimming once every 5 weeks. And I was very concerned that wasn't enough. And we went out, we swam really good races. We split them well. And so I think that maybe a lot of that comes from having too many meets. And I looked at it, and it made me structure practice where we were constantly thinking about things that with a lack of competition might even give me a leg up in COVID. But careful what you wish for. Now, COVID showed us without competition for a long time, but it was amazing how quickly people came back. So I think that's one thing I learned from COVID that I would take forward in my coaching career. The other one I learned from COVID is further emphasized, maybe more than learned, but it's hard work stays with you a long, long time. My concern, and it'd be a great thesis study for some grad student, is to do some research on these people swam fast real quickly. My own personal belief is those were the people that were probably very consistent workers before we went into COVID. They probably took responsibility more for themselves during COVID, so they kept that hard work going, maybe in a different manner, stayed fit. And they were also the most focused people, so when they came back, they were more focused than ever before, so it took them to a new level very quickly. So I think that might be that you need to work for longer, but probably the big takeaway is maybe our interpretation of rest is back to things that I wish I would have now. I used to be that standard 3 days or 3 weeks guy, and I still think that's true. might be more like 3 days and 6 weeks, because the body might take it even longer to adjust than we ever thought before, especially training real well.
Great words. Tell me, you kind of alluded to this, changes in the sport. Maybe we're swimming too much, but in your career, what's a big change in the sport that you've seen, and how did you adapt?
Equipment changed organic, but that's a whole different ball of wax. I think I
Or rubber.
Yeah, I started my first part of the year. It was a low volume thing, that real high volume stage. I think we've evolved now much more of an efficiency stage. I don't think the high volume is necessarily wrong. Matter of fact, we just had a discussion with the athletes today. I think swimming slow correctly might be the single most important thing you do. Repetition, the correct movement, cannot be replaced. And this is why the sport is so hard. Do you have to swim fast at race pace? Without a doubt. Do you have to swim specialized things? Without a doubt. The problem with doing those things, the rest of it has got to be so much higher to maintain it correct. So that you can't do it on less time. It might take even more time to do it correct if you do nothing but swim fast. Because then you've got to give them enough time to recover that you can really do fast. We have something between those times, and so we're big. We're big into groups things, and there's not a whole lot of coaches now that haven't read the things of that talent code and 1,000 times all that stuff. I think there's something that's really right about that, but correct slow is really, really important, because you're not tearing the body up as much, but you're still rehearsing the motion. And to me, that's really key. So I think the volume figures change. They don't change because you're maybe not swimming as fast. And I wouldn't say working hard. It's hard to go slow correct. It's really, really hard to go slow correct. You put together a 2-hour practice where you're swimming slow correct. It's not quite as demanding one way, but it's even more demanding in another. So I think that's where the sport has evolved more. And the evolution of the sport has become one that Bill Sweetenham always says the old dogs have to learn new tricks. And it's really important that they do. That's modify what you're doing. That's how you get to the next level. By the same token, the old tricks are still good. So learning how to put all those things together is really, really important. And I think that's where we've evolved. And maybe that's why our time too, because it's more complete package and you haven't really changed the amount of time.
It's a great answer. And, I know another one of our elite coaches always said the last frontier is neuroscience in our sport. And you touch on that again and again about correct movement and how we train the body. And I just think it can't be overlooked.
Oh, yeah. I had an interesting conversation with Ernie McCliskey not too long ago. And it's amazing some of the things that, stuff that I heard from him that, on what things you know now that there's, it's not like they're gigantic things. It's a series of little things that interlock. And I got some stuff from him 2 years ago that I wish I'd given anything to have 20.
Right. Greg, we're almost wrapping this up. And, you have a few athletes that the world will be watching. And I was so fortunate to be able to deal with a few of those athletes in Budapest at the ISL. But tell us where you're at. Tell us what's going on right now.
We've had such a different last year. We've been fortunate in some manners and unfortunate in others. But we really didn't have this massive loss of pool time. But we were in the middle of what was actually a 24-month program. And the 24-month program, you weren't going to get any breaks during 18 of it. And we were 12 months into that, 18 months when we shut everything down. And we didn't have to leave the pool. We had the luxury of pool time. Now we had we had to travel. We tried ways to get where we were going, but we were never really down. And our concern was being still and going so long, because so right now our 24-month program became a 36-month program, and then 12 months ago we were getting ready to go, and we've been a full year on that. So our concern was modifying some things and doing some changes of things and different presentation stuff. So we've got a wealth of background. So where we are right now is trying to package the preparation. I think the word preparation is much better than taper. I think taper and rest. Tapering is part of your preparation, and rest is part of your preparation. But there's all kinds of things involved in that preparation. So, especially in my last 6 years at Florida, and certainly since I've left the collegiate ranks, to me, preparation is a much better term to use, and it allows you more flexibility in what you're doing. So we're in our final preparations now, and it might be longer than before. We're just trying. I've never felt it an exact. I think preparation is evaluating where you're at. Even when you were working with me, I think you probably heard the team meeting, that those rockets they send to the moon and put off course about 90% of the time, and making the adjustments are key. So we're trying to make some adjustments, and got another meet coming up. We'll try to do some adjustments then.
Sounds good. I'll be interested to hear what you think about this, but what's the best race you ever watched?
Two jump out at me. The first one's very self. Any of the IMs in 2008, those Michael Phelps, Ryan Lochte races, they were special. You had the two best guys in the world, and I lean on these. I think they're just more fun. You got to be complete. If you're swimming both the 2 and the 400 IM, you got to have a little bit of distance perspective. You got to swim all 4 strokes, especially in the big pool. You got to swim strokes. You can't have a real weak area. You got to be trained to make those weak areas. And those guys basically in 2008 were in their prime. There were no weaknesses. And boy, their swims at that 2008 trial, those were tremendous races. And now I'm personal there, but they always coming off that backstroke doubling the 200 IM that were special, and those 400 IMs where you got two guys going 404, coming stroke for stroke the whole way, and neither one's given it. That was tremendous. But from a non-personal standpoint, I thought you might remember the year, I don't know, it was 15 or 16. The men's NC2As, the 1650, where it changed hands like 3 or 4 times, and different guys are making moves. I thought for a real swimming purist, that was absolutely amazing, because all the moves and the mental perspective went on in those races. I had no one involved in it at all, and just watching it, it was dynamic. It was tremendous. There's been fortunate to see that person way out in front. And 17.6 is always special. There's no two ways about that. But that 1650, just to sit down as a spectator that understood the sport, and I guess again a little selfish, but as just a pure spectator, 17.6. You ever get a chance to take Caleb Dressel's 17.6 out, and if you can eliminate all the other people and just watch, it doesn't really look like he's going that fast. I think those 3 all stand out. I know.
Well, I just got goosebumps thinking about all of them. But that 1650, hearing the energy grow through that race, you're right. That race is hard to beat.
Well, and every time you thought one guy had taken the race, it was command, he moved a little bit early. The other guy didn't quit. And then another guy would make a move, and the guy wouldn't quit. And it was from like 900 on, it was just tremendous. But you had to really understand what's going on. And that's why I think any scoreboard that doesn't show the splits should be outlawed. The ones where you don't have to be figuring the splits, where they actually show the splits up there beside the time, that's the only thing that makes things like that interesting for someone that doesn't really understand the sport. That you shouldn't be allowed to have a big meet without those splits.
Agreed. Gregg, what a fun interview, and I really want to thank you again for your time. It's always the most valuable thing people can give, and I hope our coaches take your words to heart. So thanks again.
I'm glad I can give something back, because and the sport's been really great for me. Love it to death, but there is a bigger world there. I would encourage other coaches to definitely make sure that you understand that bigger world out there too.
Appreciate that.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian. Enjoyed it.
Great. That was awesome. Well done.
All right. Well, thanks for sending the questions, Brian. They sound really easy when you look at them. All of a sudden, well, what did I really learn from someone else? You got to sit down there, and there's so many things. It's hard to interpret. It's not any one, it's many things. That
Right.
was great. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
There were Brian and I've got to sit in the background. Brian's got to be kind of on his game through all of these, and always ready for the next question and ready to go. But I'm getting to sit back and enjoy these, and this was easily one of the more fun ones and one of the deeper ones as far as real answers and take it to heart. And I love the candor, Coach. Really, really appreciate it. I think it's important for everybody.
It's really nice being out of college coaching. Recruiting is one of the biggest evils in the sport, because as a college coach, and I was talking to some young guy this morning who works with me and explaining it to him that they're so conscious of recruiting that everyone holds their cards so close to their vest. They're afraid to show any weakness. Show a weakness, you're afraid someone will use it against you. And unfortunately, I think that has spread into the club rank a little bit too, because of parents and everything and social media. So we get great things from social media. We get some not some great things from social media. But that's the one right there. It's hard to get people to be very candid because they're always low risk. Right now, I'm not recruiting anyone's athletes. It really doesn't matter to me so much. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting what people confide in me now that they wouldn't before.
Oh, of course.
It's
right.
Unbelievable.
We should have another call, and you can just throw everybody's secrets out there. We won't name names, but you can just list.
We'll start. We won't record that at all.
Actually, I was having a talk with someone. I think I could have one that's really, really good relative to cultures. But I'm not quite that far away from it that I want to give that one yet.
That's great.
Okay, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Guys, thank you so much.
Have a good afternoon, Greg.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.